or I can shoot up that spur and I'll be home in a lot quicker. And I've been a lot worse places on bikes, but that particular day, I remember going over a sheep rut and the front wheels lifted a wee bit and the bike just stood up. And there wasn't a thing I could do. It went one side of the spur and I went the other side. And the doctors have told me that it was actually the impact of me as I fell down the hill away from the land and landed on the butt, shattered my vertebrae.
Wow.
So 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm lying there in agony, thinking something's really wrong here. This isn't good. It actually felt like my legs felt like whitebait waders, or we call them whitebait waders, but like gumboots you can walk into the water with. But it felt like they were full of water and that my legs were hanging down the hill. The doctors later told me that was because the muscles had stopped working in my legs and there was nothing to push the blood back. So blood was literally falling in my legs.
And what type of season was it? Like it was in October, so you just come in. Is that still classed as winter?
It's
coming out.
It's still spring really.
Yeah, but still cool in the mornings, early mornings.
Yeah, it was quite hot for a lot of the day. I remember I had a hooded swan dry on and I was taking the hat on and off all day to regulate my temperature in the sun. But I remember looking at early in the day, I remember looking at the clouds thinking, oh no, it's going to rain and I'm going to be in big trouble if it rains.
What were you thinking? Like you thinking like you could get hypothermia or?
Yeah, that was my main concern, that I would get cold. And I think I've always been a bit more sensitive to the cold than other people.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm lying there, I'm thinking, I'm trying not to think about spinal injuries, but we all know a little bit about that, but I didn't know much about it. I'm trying not to think about that. I'm thinking something's really not good. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't see anything that was going to help me get found. And I thought I could hear the cooling fan on the bike. I couldn't see it from where I was. And I decided, right, I've got to do something. I'm thinking you shouldn't move if you think you've got a spinal injury, but I'm thinking I'm going to die if I stay here. So I decided to roll myself towards the bike that I could hear. And it was probably high hopes because I was actually thinking maybe I can get onto that bike and get myself home.
Wow.
I rolled, I don't know, I would say probably 8 rolls or something with a shattered vertebrae. It was just agonizing every time I did it. I got to the point where I could see the bike. And it had actually landed on the fence. It was straddling the fence. So it was like, oh no way I'm going on that. Not that I probably could have in reality.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about hope. And I think that's what saved me that day. I had that thought, that was some hope. I rolled myself, that was agonizing. Then I could see a herd of cows across the river. So, Taranaki's a dairy farming area. Cows get milked at 3 o'clock. It's about 10:30 or something in the morning, thinking, well, 4 hours or so.
So how far away from where you landed, how far away was your house in terms of meters? Like
a couple of kilometres, I'd say.
Wow. That's my
wife, Cherie, my wife at the time, had gone away for a seminar in, I think, Rotorua or something, and she wasn't going to be back till after dark. So that was another one of my concerns. If no one finds me before dark, they won't even know where I am.
And then your neighbours, like what was the distance between where your neighbours lived to, I guess, where you landed?
You couldn't see any houses or anything. There were some really frustrating things. I could see there was a railway line. I saw about 3 trains go past during the day, but no one could see me. I saw 2 or 3 planes fly over. And of course, you're waving your arms, and that's high hopes as well. I just felt like a little speck of dust in the scheme of the world, really.
Hi, and welcome to another episode on Unlocked from Within. Today's guest is Andrew Fleming. He's an award-winning motivational speaker, life coach, mentor, property investor, and author of the book Change the Channel, an inspirational story of taking control of situations that seem impossible. Andrew Fleming gives powerful keynote speaking presentations using his personal experience to demonstrate what is possible for all of us when we put our minds to it. Andrew Fleming is an engaging safety speaker for health and safety conferences, meetings, and events. From being A fit and active sheep farmer with a passion for barefoot water skiing in summer and snow skiing in winter, Andrew's life changed in an instant in October 2000 when a quad bike accident shattered his spine and left him a paraplegic. But far from being defeated by the enormous challenges he was immediately and continually faced with, 15 years on, Andrew says he is happier now than he was before the accident. And he's achieved more than many able-bodied people, including being back on the ski slopes, doing what he loves most. Andrew's motivational presentations have captivated audiences in New Zealand and internationally. His story is truly remarkable and inspiring, and his message is clear, positive, and empowering. If you find the will, you'll find the way. No matter how challenging a situation seems, there is always the option to change the channel of your thoughts from negative to positive. It's up to you to see the choice and take it from there. So let's welcome Andrew Fleming on Unlocked from Within. Hey, Andrew. Welcome to...
Hey, Marty. Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, likewise. And welcome to Unlocked from Within, the podcast series.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I think it's it's been quite a while since we've connected. The last time got to see you in person was at Cadrona.
2017.
Yeah, 2017. That was an awesome experience to be able to get to ski with you on the mountain.
And I actually just saw a photo of you. I was looking for some other things. So
yeah,
on your snowboard.
yeah. Yes, it's a honor to have you on the series, and I guess we've got you on because you've got a book which it was quite meaningful to me at the time, and having you as a coach myself personally for 12 months, I think the year was 2014, and that year, I was in industrial commercial real estate, and I don't know if you remember, but my wage at the time, I think I was earning about 60,000 a year. And looking back on the 12 months after the time with you, that year I went from 60,000 to think about it was 218,000 a year. So that's definitely the power of having yourself as a full-time coach for that 12 months.
Yes, and I do remember that, Marty. And why do you think that happened over that 12 months? Because that was fascinating to me.
I think it was just fully taking it on seriously, the personal development side and how it can improve, working with the day-to-day. I was struggling mentally with I guess the frustration of trying to earn more, and so went down an alternative route with hiring yourself full time for the 12 months and diving into all those personal development modules and the insights that came up and your mentoring and coaching.
And I have to say, you're up there at the top of the people that I've coached and what you achieved and how you reacted or interacted with that process.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah. So from that year, like you did stretch me. I guess it wasn't easy. You definitely asked questions that I wouldn't have thought about or even looked at from that perspective or perception, and I do, and like back then when you sort of dangled the carrot, would you ever go into coaching? Like I can still remember that till this day. It's like I'm just enjoying the coaching, the personal development for myself. I don't see myself coaching anyone else. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and you're doing well, aren't you, mate?
Yeah, thank you.
But that's the thing. A lot of things aren't easy, and we've got to tackle those things that aren't easy to achieve what we want.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to get straight into it and talk about your book, Change the Channel. And I guess I'd like to get into your childhood.
My childhood. Well, I would say I had a pretty idealistic childhood. I grew up in a small town in South Taranaki in New Zealand called Hawera, and grew up on a poultry farm. So one of the things is my dad was always self-employed. We had the commitment to look after 15,000 laying hens. And so, there wasn't really, oh no, we're not working now. You had to do what you had to do when you had to do it. My dad was also a jack of all trades. And so from the time I was really young, I followed him around, watching him fix things really and run the whole farm. And I think that's been a very valuable thing from my childhood, that it's allowed me to get past the challenges of a spinal injury. In conjunction with that, we were a very active family. Like dad was into fishing and hunting, so I had experiences with things like that when I was young. But one of the biggest things was when I was around 8, we learnt to snow and water ski. And those became the biggest passions in my life. And I would say very good driving forces for things I achieved since. Um, and I bought a boat when I was 23 years old. Wow. Because I saw someone barefoot water skiing when I was 10. And dad's boat wouldn't go fast enough. And I thought for years, I'm going to buy a boat and I'm going to learn to barefoot water ski. And I managed that when I was 23 years old. And after that, it was like every chance at the lake. It was only half an hour from home, so we got to go after work most nights. And I was there every day in the weekends, all summer, and even some of the winter, barefoot water skiing. And got to the point where I could ski backwards. I could do tumble turns where you go down on your bum and turn around and stand back up. I was learning to turn around from skiing forwards to backwards before I broke myself. I didn't quite master that one. And every chance I got, we live actually close to a mountain in Taranaki here, so it was only an hour to get up the mountain. So we did a lot of skiing up there when we were kids, and then there was another mountain 3 hours away, Ruapehu, and we did a lot of skiing there as kids with another family as well, that they had 3 kids and we had 3 kids. So when you've got that many kids and that many poles, you can actually make your own slalom course out of it.
That would have been an awesome experience, and the memories that you would have created. How fast were you going on the stand-up, the barefoot stand-up?
About 40 mile an hour.
Wow.
Well, I was a bit lighter. I could get away with a little bit less.
Yeah.
35 to 40 mile an hour.
Wow.
It wasn't fun when you fell off. You literally flipped over the water and face planted the water. It doesn't feel like water at 40 mile an hour. It feels more like concrete.
Oh, could only imagine.
But, one of the things I'd say about my childhood and, the passion I had for particularly water skiing, I learned at a young age, if I went home and helped Dad collect eggs and feed chooks or whatever he needed to do, he could take me to the lake after work.
Ah.
So I didn't actually get paid for those things, but I learnt that there was a reward in it for making my dad's life easier.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think even a measure on determination, I think I was about 12 and Dad was out fishing. Fishing wasn't really my thing. He'd gone fishing for the day and he was late home. And, I think it was getting close to getting dark. And I thought I'd never fed a shed of chooks before. And you actually had to lift I think it was a 40-pound bucket of mash, walk down the row and pour it in the trough evenly. It was quite a challenging thing to do. My dad was really good at it and I'd watched him do it for ages. And this particular day, I thought, I'm going to see if I can feed one of the sheds. And I went and fed shed 3. And when Dad came home, I was so proud to say, oh, you don't have to worry about feeding shed 3, Dad. I've already done it.
How long did it take you to do?
Probably a couple of hours.
and how long would it have taken your dad? Yeah.
It was quite a lot. Yeah. It was quite an effort, but that's something about determination. 11 or 12 I wasn't a big boy either.
Yeah.
And I I'd watched Dad do it. I'd kind of probably done a little bit of it, but I had that determination, I'm going to feed this whole shed. And then once you've done it once, every other time got easier.
Yeah. Is that's something you was that one of your earliest memories of setting out a goal and achieving it?
Yeah, I'd say my earliest memory was of a goal was probably the boat, but I
Yeah.
really had no idea how I was going to achieve that. I was a kid; I didn't even know how much a boat would cost.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think in a way, I think Dad taught us things like that with skiing as well. You know, like teaching you to ski off a really steep bank. You could ski straight down it as long as you didn't turn. You'd be all right as long as you had somewhere to, So there were lots of little things in our lives we learned like that.
And was there, like you do mention in the book, like your dad strived, to push you to overcome fears? Like, what were some of the fears that you had? Was it around the barefoot skiing, or was it around being on a steep mountain skiing down in the snow, or other
Yeah,
areas?
there was one lift to get to it. You had to basically just drop down a bank, and you probably were doing 80 Ks, and you had to run your speed out at the bottom. And so, at sort of, I don't know, 10 years old or whatever,
Wow.
I was doing that was a pretty scary thing. But Dad could do it. He could show us how to do it. Similarly, I remember, like kids do, throwing a tantrum, learning to water ski one day. And it was a different time back then. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
And I got over that fear and I did way better at water skiing than my father ever did.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, there are lots of things like we had the opportunity, we were on Lake Taupo one day, which is a very big lake. It takes about half an hour to drive across it in a boat or longer. And we were over the other side and there were three of us and three boys sort of my age and three boats. And we decided we would ski back to where we were staying from the other side of the lake. It was 17 miles.
Well,
and the three of us did it.
Yeah.
So it was a long way. Well, we had a couple of glips and a couple of falls along the way, but essentially we skied all the way across the lake. I was 13 years old, and my dad was so impressed. I did it on an old flat ski, one of the flat pair of skis.
Yeah.
Old man was so impressed, he went out and bought me a slalom water ski the next day.
Oh, you would have been amazed. That would have been a massive surprise.
Actually, I think it was my 13th birthday.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
So, I think little things like that, I had no idea that was going to happen, but that seemed a really cool idea to ski across Lake Taupo.
Yeah.
And I got rewarded.
Yeah.
Because I impressed someone.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. And then, so did it become like an annual trip? Like you do it once a year, going like to the snowfields, and obviously in the summer months and whatnot, you'd be doing the barefoot skiing?
Yeah, when I was a kid, we were in partnership with my uncle on the farm, so we had every second weekend off.
Yeah.
And so in the winter, we pretty much went skiing every second weekend, weather permitting.
Yeah.
The water skiing was a bit more random. It was sort of our summer holiday. We often went to Taupo or Tauranga or somewhere there was water, and there was another family had a boat that we used to water ski with. Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, Marty.
Oh, I was just saying, like, how often you went, skiing, whether it was barefoot skiing or snow skiing a year. So at that time, like it was quite heavily involved in your life growing up.
It was, like I said, the lake was half an hour or so away. We could go out after school or after work if we wanted. It was something we could just do. Oh, let's go skiing today. The weather's fine. Snow skiing was always a little bit different. You had to get the weather right, winter and all those things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was a huge part of our family lives, and our last family holiday together when I was 18 was to America.
Wow.
Where we skied in Utah a lot. most of the ski fields in Utah. A couple of big ones on the California-Nevada border. One of the biggest memories of my life.
Would have been an amazing experience.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a photo in the stream that's playing of me and my sisters standing on a ski field in America with their skis.
Yeah. And then so like through schooling, like did you finish year 12 or what were you interested in? Did you have a plan to get that? Like what was your plan to get the jet ski boat?
Yeah, I don't think I still knew when I was at school how to do that. It wasn't more sort of when I started earning money and I had people that wanted to do it with me and stuff like that. I wouldn't say I was a scholar. My mother was a school teacher and an A student, really.
Yeah.
I was horrified because I got 30% for school seat English. I went on to do the sixth form, which was the next year, and actually did 2 years in the sixth form. I think I did well. I did better at science than other things. I don't know, English, I didn't enjoy reading a book and writing a report on it.
Yeah.
Ironically, when I had a need to write a book, all that stuff went by the side, and people tell me I wrote a really good book. So,
yeah,
I think you have some of the same issues about what we taught at school. One of
Definitely.
the things I would say is the most valuable things that I've learned have been after school. But I would say that learning to read and write, being able to communicate are very important skills. I'm pretty good at maths, not really advanced maths, but I do all my own accounting and things like that. So a lot of those skills repeat on what you're doing, and the more you do them, the better off you get at them.
And what was like looking back on your childhood, like what were the values that were ingrained into you from your parents? Like, what did you think looking back, what stood out that sort of you carried throughout life?
Yeah, so mum and dad always went to church. I don't go to church myself, but I would say that I learned a lot of morals out of being brought up like that. I saw my parents, how they interacted with their staff. They always treated their staff well. We always had a good relationship with our staff. They were hard workers. I saw that. And I think that's something in society now that a lot of people don't see what their parents do, or a lot of people's parents don't work and they don't learn so much from not seeing that sort of thing. I think it's a very important part of life there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how did you fall into deciding to become an electrician?
In science, I did really good at those sort of things. I remember getting pretty much top, I hardly ever got top marks in anything, and I pretty much did something to do with electricity quite young on. I've always, because Dad was multi-skilled, another option I was looking at was cabinet making, but the electrician side won out. I was sort of more technical. And I think when you think about what I do now, like I had a carport squeaking a while ago and I can't get up there with a CRC can to lubricate it. So I made a device that I can hold a CRC can up and squirt the CRC into the carport and stop it squeaking. And I made that completely out of stuff I had lying around in my shed. And I don't believe a lot of people could do that. It took me a day and a half to work out how to do it.
Yeah.
But, it's a day and a half, but it will solve that problem for years to come.
You still figured a way to figure it out.
Figured it out. And, one of the families we went away water skiing with, like, there was always something to come up when we were away on a holiday. And my dad would be like, I'll just knock one of those up when I get home.
Yeah.
And I posted that thing about the CRC can online. And Barbara, the mother of that family, said, just a chip off the old block. But that, that's the experiences I saw. Dad never had a lot of money. So everything he could fix himself made a difference to what he could achieve and how the business worked. And that filtered through to me when I ended up broken and having to solve a horrible financial situation.
Yeah, yeah. And so how long were you an electrician for?
10 years.
10 years. And did you enjoy the work on the day to day, or was it sort of just you knew it was a job for work to get the money to go do the things you actually want to be doing?
No, I did enjoy it. And when I think about that, I think it's about the problem solving part in me. And it was more dealing with the public that I struggled with. Like, a lot, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people were really good, but there were a lot of people stuck in your mind that were quite hard to deal with, and they blamed you for you fix a 20-year-old washing machine, something else breaks down a month later, and it's all your fault.
Yeah.
But you're 20 years old too.
Yeah. I'd say it's sort of like a car mechanic. They're always the bearer of bad news to someone. It's always going to cost more money, or this is broken now, or that's broken. It's so they, I could imagine how that would be. Yeah.
Well, I always felt people were more probably open to buying a new car than they were buying a new washing machine. I would have been.
yeah, definitely. And then, so what did you end up doing after being an electrician?
Well, I married Cherie. Cherie had her own business, and she came from a farming family. And Cherie and her brother actually had stock of their own, and it was sort of time for that partnership really to step out and buy their own bit of land. I'd had enough of what I was doing. I was coming home grumpy every night about dealing with the public, and Cherie said, you should quit and we should do this. So I had the opportunity to go farming. I was pretty green at that, but again, I knew how to solve lots of problems, and I think I did quite well at farming until one day when the quad bike flipped over top of me and I broke my back.
And how old were you when that happened?
31.
31. Wow. And at what time, what were you doing on that day? Like, were you just doing what you normally do on the day?
Yeah, I was just going around the farm in the morning to check on the stock, make sure there were no problems. What I would say, something interesting that's come out in health and safety, there's a lot of stuff. Cherie and I had an argument about something the night before, and I know I wasn't happy that day. And this has come out in sort of stuff around health and safety about mental attitude when you're going to work and stuff like that. And for me, I think adrenaline was always something that cheered me up. So I got to a point on the farm and it was like, I can go that way and I'll have to open 6 gates. And that's always a bit of a pain on a quad bike. Or I can shoot up that spur and I'll be home in a lot quicker.
Wow.
And I've been a lot worse places on bikes, but that particular day, I remember going over a sheep rut and the front wheels lifted a wee bit and the bike just stood up. And there wasn't a thing I could do. It went one side of the spur and I went the other side. And the doctors have told me that it was actually the impact of me as I fell down the hill away from the land and landed on the butt, shattered my vertebrae.
Wow.
So 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm lying there in agony, thinking something's really wrong here. This isn't good. It actually felt like my legs felt like whitebait waders, or we call them whitebait waders, but like gumboots you can walk into the water with. But it felt like they were full of water and that my legs were hanging down the hill. The doctors later told me that was because the muscles had stopped working in my legs and there was nothing to push the blood back. So blood was literally pooling in my legs.
And what type of season was it? Like, it was in October, so you just come in. Is that still classed as winter?
It's
coming out.
It's still spring, really.
Yeah, but still cool in the mornings, early mornings.
Yeah, it was quite hot for a lot of the day. I remember I had a hooded swan dry on, and I was taking the hat on and off all day to regulate my temperature in the sun. Yeah, but I remember looking at early in the day, I remember looking at the clouds thinking, oh no, it's going to rain and I'm going to be in big trouble if it rains.
What were you thinking? Like, you thinking like you could get hypothermia or?
Yeah, that was my main concern, that I would get cold. And I think I've always been a bit more sensitive to the cold than other people.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm lying there, I'm thinking, I'm trying not to think about spinal injuries, but we all know a little bit about that, but I didn't
Yeah.
know much about it. I'm trying not to think about that. I'm thinking something's really not good. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't see anything that was going to help me get found. And I thought I could hear the cooling fan on the bike. I couldn't see it from where I was. And I decided, right, I've got to do something. I'm thinking you shouldn't move if you think you've got a spinal injury, but I'm thinking I'm going to die if I stay here. So I decided to roll myself towards the bike that I could hear. And it was probably high hopes because I was actually thinking maybe I can get onto that bike and get myself home.
Wow.
I rolled, I don't know, I would say probably 8 rolls or something with a shattered vertebrae. It was just agonizing every time I did it. I got to the point where I could see the bike and it had actually landed on the fence. It was straddling the fence. So it was like, oh no, no way I'm going on that. Not that I probably could have in reality,
Yeah.
but that's the thing about hope. And I think that's what saved me that day. I had that thought, that was some hope. I rolled myself, that was agonizing. Then I could see a herd of cows across the river. So, Taranaki's a dairy farming area. Cows get milked at 3 o'clock. It's about 10:30 or something in the morning, thinking, well, 4 hours or so.
So how far away from where you landed, how far away was your house in terms of meters? Like,
a couple of kilometres, I'd say.
wow. That's
My
intense.
wife, Cherie, my wife at the time, had gone away for a seminar in, I think, Rotorua or something, and she wasn't going to be back till after dark. So that was another one of my concerns. If no one finds me before dark, they won't even know where I am.
And then your neighbours, like, what was the distance between where your neighbours lived to, I guess, where you landed?
You couldn't see any houses or anything. There were some really frustrating things. I could see there was a railway line. I saw about 3 trains go past during the day, but no one could see me. I saw 2 or 3 planes fly over. And of course, you're waving your arms, and that's high hopes as well. I just felt like a little speck of dust in the scheme of the world, really.
Wow, that's mental. And did you have a dog with you? Was there a dog running?
I had a hunt away and a heading dog with me. You know what dogs are like? They knew something was wrong and they just wanted to give me kisses, and I was not in the mood for that. So they got a bit of language and they just sat beside me all day, and they barked at everything they heard. The train went past, at least the hunt away barked at everything she heard.
Yeah.
The train going past, the plane flying over, any noise, but there was no one around to hear that. I actually watched the cows start lining up at the gate at about 2 o'clock, and I'm lying there thinking, oh God, it won't be long now. And the guy's name, that happened to be Martin, happened to be late. He'd been to town that day, he'd been held up in town, he was late home for milk. He didn't get there till 4:30.
Oh, so from the time of the accident was 10 a.m. roundabouts.
Yep.
And there was no one else until 4 o'clock to sort of get to you in that time.
Yeah, I think it was 4:30 when he saw me.
Wow.
But another thing about that, I was in a green swan dry with green pants on, lying on a green Taranaki hill. He was across the river. He actually had a bullcock had come off a trough, and the trough was leaking. So he stopped, turned his motorbike off to fix the bullcock, and then he heard Moss, my hunt away, barking. He thought, what's that? That dog doesn't normally sound like that. And he started looking around. He saw the yellow Sedax tank, which is a spray tank that had come off the bike. It was lying on the hill. He could see the bike on the fence. Took him a little while to see me, dressed in green. And then he was actually going to come running across the river, and he stopped and thought about it. He thought, no, I'd better go home, because if I get in trouble, we will both be in trouble. So he went home, rang the ambulance, and the ambulance got there at about 5 o'clock.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. That's a whole day's work, really, isn't it?
So you're lucky, like you're lucky he came home because it could have been even longer.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I was starting to get cold by that time.
Yeah.
I've actually moved somehow and got my hood stuck under my shoulder, and I couldn't put my hood back on because I couldn't. I must have been just getting sorer, and I couldn't even move enough to get it out. So I was
And
starting to get quite concerned by then.
so like going back from, I guess, just from 10 a.m. to 11 o'clock or even to 12, like in that time then, it would have felt, did it feel like eternity?
It did. I,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think in a situation like that, you've got to keep being as positive as you can. But you talk about keeping the nasty thoughts out of your mind. It's pretty hard when you're in that sort of condition.
Like what were some of the thoughts that would be popping up when you were in it?
Well, I think most of the things I just remember was thinking about dying. I'm going to die here, and I had to keep throwing that out of my mind. I was really worried about just being able to stay conscious. I was worried that someone might come past and I wouldn't know because I'd passed out. Because I I can't even remember how bad the pain was, but you think about having literally smashed yourself in half. It was just agonising. But I think your mind takes things like that away from you. You don't need to experience things like that.
And so, yeah, so then like what was, to stay conscious, like what were the things that were helping you to stay conscious? Was it first that was trying to get to the bike to see if you could get onto the bike, but then after that, once you knew you couldn't get onto the bike, like what kept you conscious from then till, I guess, yeah, the rest of the day?
Yeah, well, the cows certainly helped. Once I
Yep.
saw those cows,
Yep.
someone's
That
going to come and get those for milking. So essentially, that was a lot of hope. It's only a
created
matter of
hope.
time. So it went from, God, no one's going to find me here, to I just need to stay conscious to make sure someone knows I'm here when it happens. But, you think if your body's been through that much stress, it's hard to remember. It's 20
Yeah.
years ago now, but I think I was feeling tired, or I remember feeling cold. And it's like that bit of hope. I've got to hang on until Martin comes and gets me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finds me.
And then in that time, because it was 20 years ago, what year was that?
It was the 5th of October 2000.
5th of October 2000. So yeah, we didn't even have smartphones back then, so you couldn't have, just whipped out your phone like today in today. Yeah.
Well, I often carried a phone with me, but I didn't that day. But it wouldn't have been any use to me because there just wouldn't have been any signal where I was.
Wow. Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know, it might have been in the bike or something like that,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
didn't have it on me like that.
And once the ambulance came, like what happened from then on?
One of the biggest things I remember was getting a shot of morphine and all the pain just faded away. They had to wait a little while for the helicopter. They stabilized me, gave me the shot of morphine. I was feeling a bit better by then. I was feeling like I would be okay because I had the help I needed. So the helicopter landed. They had me on a stretcher, loaded me into the helicopter. And one of the things I always wanted to do was fly over my farm in a helicopter. As they loaded me in, I said to them, I always wanted to fly over my farm. All I get to see is the bloody roof. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then I was flying off to New Plymouth, to Taranaki Base Hospital in New Plymouth. And I had the news broken to me that night that I would never walk again. And the next day they flew me off to Burwood Hospital in Christchurch, which is one of the major spinal units in New Zealand.
And was it there that you learned the full extent of your injuries, or was it was there still more?
Yeah, I think most of the time I was in Taranaki and that I was pretty sedated. I would have been in so much pain. I got there late at night. I left sometime the next morning to go to Christchurch. I don't remember a lot about that except kind of my wife turning up and my sister turning up. My sister was heartbroken, that she was there when the doctors told me that. And they said, you can't tell them that. You can't say that, And people often ask me, what did you think? I just kind of accepted it. I was alive, I think, and I wasn't thinking much past that at that point in time. Once I got to Burwood, I think lots of other things came out. Pretty traumatic time. I got there on a Friday, and they operated on me on the Tuesday, put what they call dick fixators in my back, which were about that long, and screws about that long screwed into my spine. Cut me open 17 centimetres down my back is the scar, is how long the scar is.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, well, it's like, I think the best thing to do in a situation like that is go with what they're going to do. You're with the experts, you've got to trust what they're doing, no matter how terrifying that is. But, it was a terrifying time, but, lots of thoughts about my life's over. I think those thoughts became more apparent as time went by, and you learned about, I couldn't even sit up to start with, because, all the other things that hold you up when you try to sit up weren't working. So now I do have good balance, but that's because my abdominal muscles have taken over that control, if you like. So I can sit on the edge of the bed. The first time they put me in a wheelchair, it was horrible. I've been lying down for something like 2 weeks in a bed, hardly sitting up at all. They sit you up in a wheelchair. My bum just felt like it was on fire, and I felt like sick because all the blood had run away from my head into my legs because there's no muscles there to push the blood back. And that's a challenge, particularly in the early stages, is keeping your blood pressure right when you actually sit up and do things. Doesn't affect me so much now, but it was pretty horrible in those days.
And the sensations of dealing with that pain just after that surgery, like, was that all, did you have all different pain levels you were going through, or the morphine sort of numbed it out to a certain extent?
I don't remember the back pain really after that, or maybe uncomfortable from stitches or whatever in your back, but I was starting to understand, or starting to feel the sort of neuropathic or nerve pain that I get these days. And there's 2 types to that. So my legs just burn all the time, like I'm sitting in a bath that's too hot, combined with like really bad pins and needles. Sometimes it feels like I've kind of got insects crawling around inside my legs. And that's there 24/7. And it's, in some ways, that's hard to deal with. But the other type of pain I get, which is harder to deal with when it happens, feels like electric shocks. So it literally feels like someone stuck a red hot poker in my thigh that's plugged into a wall socket. And that'll just, if I can't control the burning, it tends to turn into that. And that used to shut me down for the night. I had a desire to get back to work after the accident. It actually prevented me from continuing down that path. In the end, I've put on one drug for the burning pain called gabapentin. There were some other ones, but the main ones I had experience with were gabapentin, which was an anti-epilepsy drug that they reckon scrambled the signals in your brain, and it seemed to make a difference. But I didn't realise for 10 years that it made me have bowel accidents, sometimes multiple times a day. And that's pretty hard to deal with psychologically in your 30s. After a few years of dealing with the shocks, they put me on an opiate called OxyContin. And that stood quite a bit for the shocks for a while, but I would still get a dose every month or so. And I'm talking shocks that would shut me down at night, have me in tears, just couldn't function at all, would keep me awake half the night. And then so you were tired the next day, it would usually carry on through the next day. But once, after the OxyContin, it was kind of only once a month. And in a way, it was easy to deal with, although when you didn't deal with it every day, it was kind of harder to deal with because you got used to not having it. Yeah. But after 6 years on that, things were all just turning to custard as far as pain goes. And I sought sort of alternative advice, and people told me to get off those drugs. They're toxic to you. One guy told me it's creating toxicity in your body and creating chaos in your body. And that's what it felt like at that point. That was in 2010. So I made a decision to wean off the drugs. And the gabapentin wasn't too bad, but the OxyContin was an opiate. And I discovered I'd become addicted to it. Took me 9 months of just feeling like crap to wean off it. I couldn't even, if I dropped a full pill, I just couldn't handle it. So I ended up cutting the pills in half.
Yeah.
So I drop half a dose every week and just go through hell for the week. Once I started feeling a little bit better, I'd drop another dose, go through hell for another week. It took me 9 months to be able to deal with that,
Yeah.
I just felt like crap. I couldn't eat. I was living on fruit and vegetable juice. Not something I would wish on anyone. A lot of people have said to me, people that have had drug issues, recreational drug issues with things like that I can't believe you got off that, Andrew. I tell you, it was just pure determination. And maybe I didn't have that psychotropic effect that other people that struggle to get off it have. But I was just so determined. And even after the 9 months, I didn't feel very well, And through the 9 months, like I was waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, starting to get these electric shocks. I was advised that bathing in Epsom salts would make a difference. So that's something I've done since then, which seems to have a relaxing effect on my body and sort of a residual effect.
Wow.
And then after that, it took me 2 years to feel anything like right. And I think I went about 4 years or so taking nothing at all for pain. But it just after that, it started to get on top of me again.
Wow.
But we probably, I've carried on a bit far forward there, possibly.
No, that's all good. And so like the being in what was the length that you were in the hospital doing the rehabilitation? And
10 weeks in hospital.
Yeah.
One of my goals was to get out before Christmas, and I got released about a week before Christmas.
Wow.
But the rehabilitation was hard. It was like half a day in the gym every day. I remember just most nights going back to my bed in the ward, just feeling so knackered, and probably pretty depressed, thinking about what I'd lost in my life, if you like. And funny thing, Friends was a fairly new TV show then, and I didn't really relate to it because I didn't live in New York, never been to New York, lived in a little town. And I started watching Friends, and it made me laugh. And it became the highlight of my day was to get into bed at 6 o'clock at night and watch Friends on TV because it made me laugh. It was like something, there were things I laughed about during the day, but a lot of it was hard and literally painful.
Pushing through the pain.
Yeah. And even now, I don't know how many times I've watched the series of Friends, but quite often I'll play it when I'm making tea at night because it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And some days I still have days where, pain's quite challenging to deal with, or, there's things that are frustrating because I'm broken, and just doing something like that makes me laugh and makes a big difference to me.
Oh, that's awesome. And like just with the, like how many days when you're in the hospital, like did it finally sink in, like the news, the event, what actually happened? Like did it take a week or two, or you sort of knew after, the 3 days or so that life is going to be totally different from here on out?
Yeah, I know in the early stages, I was starting to look at how do I go back farming and things like that. So it didn't take me too long. We actually went to visit a farmer who was a paraplegic on a farm, not far from Christchurch, and saw how he was doing things. Some friends while I was in hospital took me to the A&P show. So I know my wife was there for 5 weeks. Cherie was there for 5 weeks at the time. So it was somewhere during that time that she took me out to the guy on the farm. Might have been a little bit after that when I went to the A&P show. But I think I accepted a lot of things. When you say accept things, though, there's things you don't expect to pop up all the time when you go through something like that. You know, from all the bowel stuff and the bladder stuff to finding out you've lost your sexual function. You know, big thing when you're 31 years old.
Huge.
Yeah. Still.
And so at that point, like, so you had to have the bag to pee in and
No, it's for peeing, it's what they call intermittent catheters. So you literally poke a tube into your bladder.
Yeah.
And drain your bladder that way. So that, I mean, here you are at 31 and, so here's an example. I'd been to x-rays or something like that, being wheeled around the hospital in my bed, and the orderly says, "Oh, we're taking you to Euro now." I thought, that's nice. I wonder what Euro is. So I was wheeled into Eurodynamics on my bed, 3 nurses standing around the bed. The first one who reminded me of the grumpy old lady on Coronation Street said, "Andrew, have you had any erections since your accident?" Thinking, what the hell are you asking me that for?
Yeah.
Well, a bit of really bad news, But yeah, you don't go to the toilet in front of people in general, do you?
Yeah.
That was something you had no choice in. You had to learn how to do all these things. The nurses told me about men in their 50s and 60s crying at the thought of having to catheterize themselves.
Yeah.
But like a lot of things that are hard in life, you've got to accept them and move on. And it's just 22 years later, it's just habit now. I don't think much about it,
Yeah. Amazing. And like through that period, like did you ever have any suicidal thoughts? Did any of that go through your head?
Yeah, I don't so much remember in hospital. I think, the next thing, I got out of hospital just after Christmas, was feeling really positive about my future with Cherie. I was looking forward at how I went back to farming, things like that. I'd been home from hospital a week. We had a big party to welcome me home from her side of the family and my side of the family. The next morning I got up. She looked me in the eye and said, "I need to talk to you about something." "Don't worry, it's nothing bad. I'm leaving you."
Oh, God.
I'll tell you, it seemed pretty bad to me. It just crashed my world. And, when you talk about suicidal thoughts, I think that was one of the biggest things. I just felt thrown away. You had all this other stuff to deal with. I felt, I had my moments of feeling sorry for myself, but, it's interesting, like the friends that took me to the A&P show, that memory came up on Facebook a while ago, and I messaged her and said, "Thank you guys for doing that." And they said, "Oh, we were a bit worried because it was a really cold day and we were worried about taking you out of hospital, but you seem to be in such a positive place. And that is a thing that made a huge difference to my life." You just learn to tackle those things and get out and learn about things.
And so, like through that period, like if someone's listening to this podcast, whether it's watching it or listening to it, and they're going through an accident that could be similar, or and like what did you find helped to just get through the day by day? Was it not looking too far into the future? Was it just looking at what can I do today? Like, what were some things that you felt looking back that actually kept you in a positive state while still dealing with those negative thoughts in the back of your mind, dealing with the amount of pain you're going through? Like, you would have had like thoughts, just give up and whatnot.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was the day-to-day stuff. I think I had the overview of, getting back to my wife and getting back to work and doing the things that I like. one of the things that I think made a big difference, and no one ever told me, but I think it was probably planned like this, that there were 4 beds in the ward room that I was in, and there were 2 tetraplegics, and there was 1 paraplegic who was about my age, but he'd been in a chair for 16 years. And I remember nurses saying to me, look, Andrew, I know this seems hard, but you are actually one of the lucky ones. And what they meant was look around at the tetraplegics in the spinal unit and getting to know these 2 tetraplegics and things and seeing the challenges they had to go through. You know, the nurses are saying, well, look, Andrew, you will be independent. You will be able to live alone if you want, or, you know, you'll be able to drive yourself, things like that. And I'm looking at these tetraplegics thinking, wow, you know, they need someone to get them out of bed, to take them to the toilet, everything. So, you know, I often say to people when I'm coaching or in speeches and things, you know, look around, because you will usually find someone that's worse off in some way. And it may not even be the same type of thing. But I guess now I'm married to a blind woman now. You know, our disabilities kind of complement each other. But man, every time I look at something, I'm glad that I can see it. Even if I have to sit in a wheelchair and I'm going through this pain. In some ways, she's more independent than me. You know, she can stand up, do whatever, you know, things like that, but she can't see. In some ways, that's more limiting than my disability. So there's kinds of lines everywhere in life, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a bit of a duality.
Yeah, and
day and night.
Yeah, the paraplegic, his name was Warren. Him and I became really good mates. Unfortunately, he died in 2021. He had other complications and he'd been in a chair for a long time. But
Sorry
man,
to hear.
I learned so much off that guy, you know. When I was in Christchurch, he lived in Christchurch at that point. When I was in Christchurch, I used to go and stay with him. He later moved back to Wellington. When I was doing a lot of my personal development and things like that, there were a lot of things I went to in Wellington, and it was great for me because I knew I had an accessible bathroom in Wellington, because that's a real big challenge when you're travelling around as a paraplegic, having bathroom facilities or sharing facilities.
Mm.
So,
things you don't think about unless you're actually going through it and experiencing it yourself.
Yep. But yeah, you know, yeah, just spending time with someone like Warren that had been in a chair for a long time, it just broadened my horizons about what is actually possible. And there are other people that came into my life down the track like that as well.
And so you would say they were like mentors at that period of time?
To a big degree. More so a lady called Val that I met at one of my first reassessments at Burwood. So this was 3 months later. And we just hit it off straight away, you know. She was a little bit older than me, but I started going out around Christchurch with her, doing things that I'd been and done with Cherie and other people that I found really scary. Yet Val and I, like, we went out on the bus from the hospital, we went around the gardens in Christchurch, and things that really pushed my limits, but I trusted that it was okay to do it because I was doing it with someone that had been in a chair for 30 years. Yeah, she'd been in a chair 30 years at that point.
Wow.
Was paralysed when she was 10 and she was about 40 at that point, yeah.
Amazing. And so you would have had, like, on the day-to-day, like, you would have had the thoughts of giving up and quitting whatever you would, you know, whether you're doing rehab, and when the pain came up, that would have arose, and I would have imagined, like, the feeling of quitting and giving up.
No, I don't really remember having those feelings, but I have seen that with other people. When I was on one of my assessments, I saw someone who was refusing to learn to get up a curb in a wheelchair, which is quite a scary thing because you have to race up to it at quite a speed, lift your front casters at the last minute, and use the momentum to get your back wheels over the curb. And if you muck it up, you fall out of your chair generally.
Yeah.
I saw this guy refusing to do it. I think it was that night I was going down to the fish and chip shop from the hospital to get some tea, and he was stuck on a culvert because he hadn't learned to do that. And the next day he was in the gym wanting to learn to do it because he realised the importance of it. But I think maybe I had a bit more foresight than some people, that I could see, like, I've got to learn these things to get through it.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things I remember is when they taught me to sit, sort of balance on my back wheels in a wheelchair. They sort of tied a rope to you so you couldn't tip out of your chair, and I started doing that, and I thought, wow, this is just like when I'm barefoot water skiing. And so I didn't find that particularly scary at all, whereas I think some people did find that really, really scary.
Mm.
So it's interesting how you can call on some of your previous experience to help whatever challenges you've got in your life at that point.
Yeah, yeah. And like, what was the, like the emotional effect of hearing the news with your wife at the time, Cherie, telling you, you know, I'm leaving you. Like, you've just gone through all those challenges and adversities, and I guess get to a stage where you've got an idea of, dealing with the new you. Um, what what was the emotional effects that came up, and how did
Not
you
that
yeah, what happened?
um, I think it was pretty unbelievable the day she said it. I don't know that it quite clicked in till the next day or so. But I can literally remember sitting in the car pretty much crying. I remember one of my sister's friends driving past me on mum and dad's driveway and sort of questioning, oh no, I've just brushed it off, I'm all right. My mum went on to become a psychologist. So she was actually a practicing psychologist at the time I had my accident. And I moved into a house on their farm, family homestead sort of thing. And she'd have never really said, but she used to come and see me pretty much every night after work. And I think there was quite a period of time that she probably wondered if I would still be alive when she got home. And I remember spending a lot of days just literally staring at the wall, just didn't know what to do. Hard thing to climb out of on top of everything else. A lot of people have said to me a relationship challenge is pretty emotionally challenging to deal with, and for one thing, and they've said you had both of that to deal with, because I felt pretty guilty about myself the way I'd felt a lot of the time, and it was really hard to pick yourself up out of that and move on. I guess, that's another place that Val comes in, that, I was thinking, I've been left. No one's going to want this broken man. I'm screwed. And I met Val. We just hit it off. It ended up she needed somewhere to live. Again, the disabled bathroom things came in. So she moved in with me as a flatmate. And I think I was actually quite oblivious to it. And we were talking about relationships and, being attracted to people and people being attracted to you. And she said to me, actually, Andrew, I think you're a bit of all right. And I don't think I even realised for 5 or 10 minutes later. And we ended up in a relationship, which didn't work out. There were just things. She was older than me. I wanted to have kids, which I had never ended up doing, ironically. But we stayed really good friends. Unfortunately, she had a stroke a few years later, and she died 3 years ago, I think it was.
Oh, sorry to hear.
So, and that stuff weighs on my head a wee bit too, that I've lost two very good paraplegic friends, and now I've been in the chair 22 years, and, what is the future? I think you need to recognise things like that, but I try to keep my mind off it as much as I can.
And then dealing with all that, like on top, I guess a thing that I think a lot of people forget, unless they're actually going through something where they've got to get medical surgery and that, like what was the financial costs that you would have had to do? Like, did you have insurance and all that, or like that would have, like dealing on top of everything else, there was the financial side of it.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of lessons out of that. We lived off Cherie's income. I was working for our future. It didn't seem important what I earned. We had her income insured and everything, and then it was me that this happened to. And in New Zealand, we have a national insurer called the Accident Compensation Corporation, or ACC. They assessed my income on the worst year in 10 years of self-employment, and put me on the minimum wage of $265 a week.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was just devastating. That was just another effect of being thrown away. There was Cherie, there was ACC. It just made you feel worthless.
Yeah.
That was another big challenging thing to lift your mind out of.
And then you would have had costs from the surgeries in the hospital as well to deal with and all.
No, well, the upside of ACC, if you have an accident in New Zealand, and ACC is actually funded by employers.
Okay.
They pay for all your surgery. They pay for everything. Like they've just modified this house. They've probably spent, I don't know, a couple $100,000 modifying our house a couple of years ago. They buy all my wheelchairs, replace them every 5 years, pretty much everything I need.
So luckily you had that.
Yeah, well, it's just a thing that everyone in New Zealand has.
Still has, yeah. Like other countries don't even have that.
So well, it's an interesting thing because obviously I've got some issues with ACC over how they assess my income.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is one of the things was Cherie built a building. Her company normally paid me a contract fee for things I did for their company. We didn't have enough money to pay me that. Didn't seem important, but they would only look at one financial year. The last financial year before your accident was all they would look at. The year before I earned 37,000, they assessed my income at 14,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ways out of that, I'd have to thank my mother for that. Like they were in a situation they had to implement a risk management program on the poultry farm, and that was out of Dad's realm of what he thought he could do. I had skills that Mum could see could help that. And, she encouraged me to go out to the egg room. She said, you know how to pack eggs, grade eggs, whatever. Go out there, figure out what you can do. And I really thought she was just trying to give me a job. I don't know that she'd mentioned the risk management thing at that point. She was just like, go out and see what you can do. And, I really thought I didn't want to be given a job. I wanted to be productive and worth the money I was earning. That was a very important thing to me. So I started going out, just learned that if I lifted a table up a little bit, I could get my knees underneath it and I could pack eggs into cartons or things like that. I'm quite capable of writing dockets and organising eggs for delivery, and Dad would go out and do that. ACC supported me to get back into work and work for Mum and Dad. They bought me things they contributed to a vehicle that I could drive so that I could deliver eggs. They bought me what they call a standing chair so that I could stand up and use the shrink wrapper and shrink wrap trays of eggs. And that actually came very useful for other things later on in life. But just, all sorts of things like that they funded. I had a career path to get back to work. Mum and Dad were prepared to pay me $40,000 a year. They saw that my skills were valuable. The thing is, I could only handle, my body at that point would only handle working half a day or half a week of work, basically.
Yeah.
Even doing that, I was going home every afternoon, starting to get shocks. They would carry on all night. I'd wake up in the morning, it'd be a bit of a mess. I'd go back and do it again. And most days it repeated like that. I did that for a year. And in the end, I just said to ACC, look, I'm not doing this for the minimum wage. This just is too cruel on me. And if I worked half a week, it actually cancelled my entitlement to ACC. I was no better off financially, but my quality of life reduced. So I went back on ACC and looked at other things.
Yeah. And at what point were you able, when they set up the car so you were able to drive? Like how long after the accident was that?
So that's another thing with ACC. They actually fund our vehicles because of the cost of modifying them. So they buy you a reasonable vehicle that will last you a long time because it costs so much to put a hand control in them. So we actually bought a vehicle while I was in Christchurch. It was probably because it was so close to Christmas, we couldn't actually get it modified down there. So Cherie flew down to get me and we drove home together in it. And then it got modified in Hawera within the first couple of weeks after the new year. So pretty much straight out of hospital, I had a car that I could get around in. And actually, I would say that after Cherie dropped the bombshell, that was a very valuable thing for me. Because of my love of water skiing and water and things like that. Sometimes, whether I was in Christchurch or just at home feeling down, I'd just go for a drive and sit by a river or the sea or the lake and look at things like that.
So that gave you a sense of freedom, being able to drive. Like that's the feeling you get, that sense of freedom from skiing or water skiing. It was
certainly freedom, but it also was part of my old life back. I mean, it's a hassle getting in and out of the car because you've got to pack your wheelchair up and things like that. But I soon learned I could drive as far as anyone else.
Yeah.
It was a hassle going down to the shop to get some milk, but if you get in the car to drive to Auckland to go to a seminar or something, it's really not much different to anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, like it blew my mind when you picked me and my wife Courtney up when we went up to the mountain to Cardrona to the day, just to see how much energy goes into you driving and getting down certain things. And then when I still remember when you said to me, can you carry my the sit down ski for me, like the weight of that, and I'm carrying it. I'm like in my head, shit, he's got
15 kilos.
He's got to bring that down as well as the wheelchair. Hopefully, find a car park that's as close as it can get to the ski resort, and then on top of that, trek through on the wheelchair through the mud and the slushy snow, and it blew my mind, like. And then coming back to the car, making sure people haven't parked too close with their doors, like that whole experience was mind blowing, just from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I got into speaking and wrote a book and things, because I could just see that people really just couldn't perceive. And to be fair to them, that's not, they just couldn't perceive all the things that had to go on to live your life like that.
Yeah.
People were often complimenting me for what I was achieving. And I see it like this, that people look at you in a wheelchair and they think, how hard has it been in a wheelchair? They don't see the toileting stuff. They don't see the loss of sexual function, or how hard it is just to get in and out of a car, or
the simple things.
Lying on E-lines is a whole different thing,
Yeah. Things that you would not have thought about unless you're actually going through it. And it's like I said, it's inspiring. It was an awesome experience to be able to see you in action and go. And it just made me, when you got to Cardrona and we skied that day at Cardrona, like I was just thinking, wow, you've got to really love skiing to be able to get to put up with all the other crap to just get you to the chairlift. It's a lot of effort and pain.
Exactly. And when you talk about the cost of things, so in the 90s, we've got a little club field up on Egmont, and it's got a nutcracker rope tow, and it was awesome skiing up there. I could wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, get out of bed and go skiing in the winter. It didn't thaw out up there enough to ski until lunchtime. We skied up there for $10 for the afternoon as club members. Now the difference is, even Ruapehu, which is the next closest mountain, you've got to walk up Egmont, so I can't go up there. I wouldn't be able to ride the nutcrackers even if I could get up there. Ruapehu's not as accessible as Cardrona, so the only real answer is to go down to Cardrona and go for a month or two at a time, which used to be 10 grand. I'm a bit worried about what it's going to be next year. But it's not just shooting off for a day skiing when you get the moment. I have skied Ruapehu. It's just last year they didn't get much snow. They were having to download people on chairs. It's just not practical for me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put other people through that sort of thing. I like to be as independent as I can. Again, going to Cardrona, so I went with another paramate for 7 years in a row, I think. We were both totally independent on the ski field. We could get our sit skis to the snow, get in them ourselves, go off skiing for the day. And luckily, there are lots of really nice people on ski fields, and they see you carrying your sit ski on your lap in your wheelchair. They or see you getting out of the boot, they often offer to carry it to the snow for you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And just to give people some context, I guess Cardrona's in the South Island of New Zealand and you live in the North Island. How far of a drive is it?
My mate and I used to do it in 2 days. We'd leave here fairly early in the morning. There's a ferry crossing, which takes about 3 hours. We would get to partway down the South Island by 9 o'clock that night. We'd get up the next morning and we'd drive the rest of the way to Wanaka, which is near Cardrona. And that would take us all day the next day. We'd get there sort of 5 or 6 o'clock at night that night. And you can do that when you've got 2 drivers. But now Larissa and I go by ourselves. Larissa skis. And another reason we go to Cardrona is there's no support for her as a blind skier. There's no support for her in the North Island. So we sort of take about a week to get down there now because it's a bit, as I'm getting older too, I don't like driving that far in one hit and things.
Yeah, it takes its toll.
Yeah, we've got friends in Christchurch, so we split it up a bit and things like that. But, just everything is a challenge,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, actually, last time we were in Wanaka, we got locked down for COVID. We had the option to drive home, and I thought, how the hell am I going to drive home and get a ferry on time and everything? By myself, it was just too much drive. I thought, nah, we'll stay here and hopefully the lockdown's not too long. But it was 3 weeks. The upside was, after that, there was no one there, and I was skiing straight onto the lift.
Oh.
Run. One morning, I did 568 vertical meters in 3 hours.
Oh, that's awesome. That would have been great. Yeah. Could imagine. And so, like, how long after the injury did you figure out, I want to give the sit-down skiing a crack?
While I was in hospital, I saw a photo of a guy on a sit ski on the gym wall, and that was another bit of hope. It's like, wow, I can go back skiing. Again, I didn't really know how. I thought there would be more cost in it. When you start looking into it and you realise that a sit ski is about 10 grand, the easiest place to go is a long way away. It was like, I had a go at it at Mount Hutt near Christchurch in 2001, in September 2001 that was. And I didn't do very well. It was a little bit early, really. But
so like learning a bike again.
Yeah.
You're learning something new.
Yeah, and I wasn't really, I don't think I was physically up to it. I had to go the next year at Ruapehu, and I did a lot better at it. And then the following year, I had the opportunity to go to Wanaka with an organisation called Backup that gets disabled people back out in the outdoors. And on that trip, with the help of a volunteer, I got most of the way around Cardrona ski field. Although I wasn't independent, I needed a bit of help when I fell over and couldn't guarantee I could get back up, and it was all a bit scary. And I actually had a couple of trips down there that year and decided after that if I wanted to improve and get to where I wanted to with that sport, that I was going to need my own gear. But I didn't have the money to buy a sit ski, even be able to afford to go and use it if I could afford to buy it. And so in my mind, it was like, I'm going to fix this financial problem and I'm going to go skiing. And that's what I did. So going back to the financial side of it, like how did you stumble on buying property and renting it out and figuring out, obviously you couldn't afford to get someone else to fix it. So you had to figure out, on top of all that, you had to do the painting yourself, figure out how to paint the house and do the little touch-ups and the handyman jobs from the wheelchair. Like, how did that all come about? Yeah, well, so Sheree and I had bought a rental property, one of the ones I still own, and that was part of our marital settlement, as a way for me to have passive income in the future. I hadn't thought about being able to paint or anything like that. that sort of came along a bit later on. But houses were really cheap in our area. So a little town half an hour away from Hawera called Stratford, I bought a house there in 2001 for $32,000.
Wow.
And it was right at the start of a boom. It tripled in value in 3.5 years or something. As that property had gone up, I started thinking, well, this is a way forward. As things are booming, you've got different options to buy things. So I bought another property in Hawera, which I still have, for $55,000. And then, the Stratford one just kept going up. It was a little bit far away. It needed a bit of work, and I hadn't got my head around how to do that sort of thing. So I sold that one. Actually, that timing's a bit wrong, because I know that the Egmont Street property, which is the one out of the marital settlement, a tenant trashed that in around 2003. And a mate was going to give me a hand to do it, and his mother got sick, so he didn't have the time to do it. But I'd watched some of the things that he was doing, and I saw some of the new tools that were available that didn't used to be available, like extendable poles that you can put a roller on, or a sander or something like that. And I started thinking, wow. And so I literally just started having a go at it. I spent 6 months at that particular house going there. I just put myself through hell, really, because I was in a lot of pain every day. I went there for pretty much 8 hours a day for 6 weeks and just pushed it. I had to just sit it out when I couldn't handle the pain. Did things like got out of my chair, dragged myself around the floor so that I could paint the skirting boards. Figured out things like, with a speedy brush on a pole, I could do things like this architraves around the ceiling. If I was careful, I didn't get paint where I didn't need to. I could paint the ceilings with a roller and the walls with a roller. So I worked out how to do it. And so that was 2003. Then in 2004, I bought the Surrey Street one, and it just needed a little bit of painting and stuff, so that wasn't as big a deal as the Egmont Street one. And I don't actually, I sold the one in Stratford, made about a 70k profit. So I was a bit cashed up at the time, and I started looking at different options. I was going to all sorts of property investment seminars and just seeing different ways forward with things. I'd come across people that were buying houses to renovate them and sell them. So I bought a property in Invercargill with the view of just doing it up and selling it.
Doing a flip. Yep.
Yeah, doing a flip deal. In the time before I'd bought that property and I settled it, I went to a course with a guy called Rick Otten on the Gold Coast. And his thing was vendor finance, rent to buys, things like that. And the house I live in now, I actually bought it to sell as a rent to buy. But funny thing, a lot of people can't see the value of those sorts of things.
Is the rent to buy only good in a certain market? Like, say, if a market's booming and you think it's going to keep going up, rent to buy, or you might think it's going to tank. Like, if it's booming and you get the feeling, the market's been going great for so long, surely there could be a downside. Is the rent to buy not so great to use that strategy in that type of circumstance? Or
I would say that when the markets are booming, people are just going to sell their houses. When things are hard to sell, they might look at different opportunities. But I wanted to actually be able to help people into houses, because of the things that I was learning.
Mm.
But in a little town like this, people couldn't see it, so I would advertise this property, $268 a week, including rates and insurance, own it in 15 years. Someone wrote on my sign, $269 times 15 years is $200,000. What a ripoff. But the reality was they were paying a little bit more interest than what I was paying to the bank. They only needed $1,000 to get control of the house. They could then renovate the house themselves and make it worth more money. And 3 years down the track, go to the bank and finance out, because they would have generated some equity and got themselves a mortgage. But I feel a lot of people, maybe in the first home sort of market, don't really understand the market well enough to understand things like that. And then there seemed to be a negative thing in New Zealand with the lawyers that, don't trust that. That's not a good thing. I mean, this house has had a lot of money done on it now. ACC spent a lot of money on it for me. It's worth 300,000 or something. It would be worth at least 200,000. So anyone that had taken that deal on, even in the state the house was in, they would be sitting on roses now. But what's the biggest challenge to getting a house is saving. If you're talking about $100,000 house in those days, it was $20,000 deposit.
Yeah.
But $20,000 was a lot of money for a lot of people to save in those days.
Yeah.
And I tried to do a similar thing with my Invercargill house. But same thing, people didn't want to take up on it. I've put seeds like that in tenants' heads. But no one's really taken me up on those things. So that's their choices, I guess.
Yeah. And then you would have had, I imagine, did you have while painting and that you would have had you would have had certain challenges of figuring out how to paint. It's not as easy as just, get it all set up and away you go. Did it take a lot longer to paint? Did you have the frustration? Did frustration come up? Yeah.
Yeah. People have said, man, you do a good job. Why don't you do that commercially? And it's not a practical thing for me to do commercially. But from my point of view, I had more time than money. I've had some people say to me, oh, I hate painting. And I sit there and I think, well, I can't say it's my most favourite thing to do, but man, it's made me a lot of money. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the CRC thing. I had a need, so I worked out how to do it.
Yeah.
And, I didn't do all of it myself. At the same time, Mum and Dad had some rental properties. So, Dad would come and do things that I couldn't manage, and I'd return and go and do things on his houses, that I could make it easier for them, because at the time he was trying to run a farm and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
My house in Invercargill, I employed a couple of students. It was just before Christmas. To do things that were going to be challenging for me. And then Dad came down for about a week and worked like a Trojan, and so partly teamwork. I had motivated parents that were prepared to help me and could see a way forward for me. And they ended up coming to property investment seminars and mentoring and things like that with me, and ended up with a bit of property themselves. I mean, they're well into retirement now, so they've sold most of it off. But that journey turned out a very good thing for all of us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very inspiring. It's, if you think you can't do something, it's always good to see a photo of you, Andrew, with painting a house, because you look at that and you're just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Get back to it.
But going back to the emotion of a marriage breakup amongst all of that, one of the things that came out of that was one of the first property investment seminars I went to. I heard a guy called Kurrick Ashley talk, and I was feeling really happy about what I was learning, positive about where my future was going. I could see a way forward, but some of the things he said, I think, brought up a bit of emotion around what had happened with Cherie. I'd find myself sitting in the shower muttering about what she did in the morning and things. And I thought, I need to go and talk to this guy. And I waited for him. It was a break. He was talking to someone else, and I just sat back and I was sort of thinking, positive mindset and everything. And I wheeled into his, he finished talking to the other guy. I wheeled into his personal space, and I just lost it, I sort of started blubbering a bit. And he says, "What's wrong, sir?" I said, "Oh, I had this accident and my wife left me, and ACC assessed my income like this." And he says, "Stop there, sir." He said, "If you were going to marry this girl and you knew that she would leave you as soon as it all went wrong, would you marry her?" I said, "No." He said, "What the fuck's your problem then?" And he's not a guy that would use that word all the time. but he used that, when they talk about the importance of language, he used that to make an impact. And it was honestly like a penny dropping. And, I thought very differently about all that after that. And
you had a different perspective.
Had a different perspective on it. And Kirk referred to it as reframing.
And so was this the start of your going into the personal development, healing and journey?
It was really my first exposure to personal development. At that point, Kirk lives on the Sunshine Coast up that way somewhere. But he was coming over from New Zealand at that point, doing quite a few seminars. And so I went to the first one, paid whatever it was, went to the first one. And then once you'd been to one seminar, you had the option to go back and attend a seminar as part of his crew. So you'd experience the same stuff again for free. You just had to pay for your accommodation, things like that. And so I went back and crewed 4 times for him, took my 8 or 9-year-old nephew to one of them, and just learnt so much, as time as time went on like that. But the thing is, I think when you expose yourself to that sort of stuff, you meet all sorts of people and, become familiar with different organisations. So there was an organisation called Step Up that was doing coaching for problem kids in schools. And I think that came somehow through Kirrick but out of attending, being involved with Step Up, I met people like Mike Hancock, Roger Hamilton, just so many people like that. Organisations like the National Speakers Association, which just led me to so many different things. That's part of how I heard about Rick Otten. I attended one of Roger Hamilton's seminars in Bali in 2008, and I'd become Think and Grow Rich. Well, they were running a lot of seminars around that time, and that's how I came across the Blackburns. And
Beyond Success, and
got involved with Beyond Success, became a coach. But an interesting thing about that, I was at the seminar in Bali. They sort of had a bit of a sort of meditation time. They played some relaxing music. They said, think about what the purpose is that you're on this planet for. And for me, it's just in a relaxing state like that. It was like my mind kind of flashed, my life flashed through my mind, all these things that had happened. And I came out of it thinking, as horrible as all of this stuff has been for me to go through, look at what it's actually taught me. And I believe that I've got a lot of skills now to help other people. And I was thinking more on the lines of speaking, that, that sort of train had come along. So on the way home from Bali, I've got a mate in Perth, and I'd arranged to stay with him and to go to this Think and Grow Rich seminar. What a very fitting thing after that to meet someone that was running a coach training program. And when you talk about financial challenges, I think it was about $30,000 to do the program. I didn't have $30,000, but I really wanted to do the program. I sort of knew I had some money coming down the track, and I had space on my credit card. I ended up with $17,000 on my credit card. But the old way, where there's a will, there's a way. And I figured out how to do it because that's what I really, really wanted to do. And, that made a huge difference to my life. Just the coaching thing and the inspiration from coaching. And I would have to say, Marty, that you were very inspiring to coach. You took on what was said to you and you went and did something with it. Whereas there's other people I've coached that didn't do that. And you'd have to, you don't get testimonials from those type of people, but you'd have to wonder what their view of it is afterwards. And a lot of it comes down, as you know, to what you are prepared to put into anything yourself to achieve it.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's the pain. It's the pain of having enough of dealing with how current reality or how life was, and that there's got to be another way to live. And so
Yeah,
redistributing that pain, that energy of pain
yeah,
in a way to motivate to figure out, well, there's got to be another way. I've got to figure this out. And so
yeah.
that's what drives me, I guess, until this day, and will keep driving me, and I'll keep learning.
Yeah, in a way, the worst thing that happened to me has become somewhat of a career, or at least potential to better my life.
It's giving you meaning and fulfillment and
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like often when I was coaching people, you get presented with things you're not sure how to deal with. You need time to think about it. And I would often say to people, "This happened to me, and this is what I did about it. Can you just go away and think about that in context to what to what's troubling you?" And very often the next time I spoke to them, they would come back and say, "Yeah, I've got the answer, Andrew," because it's about shifting your perspective on things. And I
Definitely.
really think there's a lot of things in my story that people just go, "Oh my God, how did you do that?" That's nothing compared to what I'm dealing with. But
Definitely.
because really, and to clarify that, a lot of the things that stop us doing things are often a lot bigger in our heads than they are in reality, or than they are for someone else's perspective, eh?
Definitely. Definitely. Like, it's funny, if I go for you'd have these moments in other ways, but like when I go for a run, I don't like running, but when I'm running, I put things on, like I'll put a podcast on. That's what I love doing. And then I'll try to reward myself with a swim after running. And I know I've got to run to change my state and
Yep.
to set me off on the day ahead with positive momentum. Because if I don't run, I'm more reactive and triggered to the fires or the curveballs of life that I've got to deal with during the day. And so that's what I've figured out. But while running, like, it's interesting that the thought, those, that negative self-talk that comes up, like, like I'll be running and I'll be like, oh, maybe we'll just finish up in the next 100 meters or so. And it's like, what's that? Who's telling me to finish now? And so when that comes up, now I'm like, I'm going to keep running further than that, and I'll run double that. But it's interesting that that's something we all live with, that voice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about listening to podcasts and things. I mean, I'm not a big reader myself, but a lot of the information I absorbed was when I was mowing the lawns, and when I was living on the farm, I spent 2 hours a week mowing the lawns. So there was a lot of stuff you could listen to, whether they were things from National Speakers Association about speaking, or might have been Paul Blackburn stuff, or books like Think and Grow Rich, or lots of I know you've read a lot of the similar books. And even when I was driving, I would hardly ever listen to the radio or anything. It would all usually be something that was going to benefit what I was trying to achieve. And I think that's an important thing. Good use of your time like that.
So the power of having all these goals. Did you think that was one of the biggest things that's been able to put one foot step in the next, just keep moving forward each day, like working towards a goal? Do you think that had significance?
Yeah, definitely. And we don't always know where that goal's taking us, but in some form, keep it in your mind and see what changes. Sometimes you need to change direction a little bit as you learn something else, or, oh, okay, now that I know that, maybe that's not quite the goal. Maybe I'll go this way slightly.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Eh?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, yeah. And so the investment on your personal development, like, can you put a number on it, or is it priceless?
And what it's got me, I would say priceless. I'll be guessing somewhere more than 100 grand.
Yeah.
Um,
That's it. 100 grand investing in you, though.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that is a bit of a guess. It's
Yeah.
a long time since I have actually thought about that.
Yeah.
I remember looking it up a few years ago. It was probably 50 grand.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've got to take into account all the travel, all that stuff.
Yeah, as well. Yeah. But like to someone, I guess to someone that's listening, that's never had a mentor or a coach, like the importance of having one, like what do you think's the biggest thing that's helped you with your life?
Yeah, well, just mindset would be the most powerful thing, is just learning, like the things we've talked about, just learning to adjust how you're feeling and point it in a better direction. Yeah, just
Do you think you would have if you didn't have those mentors and people that have been through what you've been, like try to seek people that have gone through something similar to what you're going through? Do you think that's sort of fast tracked, I guess, the recovery and getting on with life rather than being stuck in the victim mentality?
Yeah, well, let's say I can say that in a disability world.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there were challenges like going to a bank when you're earning so little money and trying to borrow money. And what I would say when I got into the personal development world and met people like Kirk and Paul Blackburn, and they were people that believed in you, they could see your potential. And that all helps you pick it up. A lot of the time, when you look at buying houses, renovating houses, I didn't know how I was going to do those things. But I was determined that I was going to own a house one day and have some passive income and be able to go skiing. They were three really major things like that. But when you look at something like property investment, like I think a lot of people thought I was a bit nuts, the money I was spending on some of these things, or even the travel and things like that. But if you look at spending $50,000 or $100,000, or now it's $500,000 on a house, the cost of the education to learn from people that have done it could save you that deal on, it could save you that amount of money just on one deal, because something that you don't lose money on. There's lots of traps when you talk about business.
Yeah.
And even, just knowing people in the same field that you feel comfortable, you can ring up and say, what would you do here, when you're not sure about it? But if you don't do things like I did, you're not surrounded by people like that. And there's people I ring up that I might not have spoken to for 5 or 10 years, but sort of keep in touch with them on Facebook a bit and things. And I mean, one guy I met through speaking when I needed to sell my house in Invercargill, it was a challenging time to do it. He sold it in 3 days for me.
Yeah.
Took the money out of that, freeholded the house we live in. So when you talk about the cost of things relative to the value, you've got to think carefully about how you actually weigh those things up.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And how did you meet your new wife, Larissa? How did that all come about?
So something I learned in personal development, so I was with someone else, and I decided after I split with her that I was going to be by myself for a couple of years, and that was something I picked up out of personal development. Be happy with yourself before you start the next thing. And I just happened to be at the supermarket one day. I was loading the groceries in the boot of my car, and someone said, "Hello, Andrew," and I turned around, and it was Helen, who used to be married to an old flatmate, and I hadn't seen for a long time, and she was actually flatting with Larissa. And so Larissa was there with her guide dog, Helen, and I'd never met a guide dog, and I was quite excited about meeting the guide dog, and we sort of gave her a pat, and we had a bit of a chat, and we both walked away from that thinking, what just happened? And I didn't want to be bold and say, oh, here's my phone number, but I said, well, if you're interested, I've written a book. Feel free to pop around and get it sometime. And Larissa actually went home and Googled me. And the next day I got an email from her, and it all just took off like that. They came round a few days later and got my book, and she took it home and read it on her computer. So I could literally say that the effort I put into writing my book earned me a wife.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so, yeah, what can you tell us a little bit about the, I guess, the challenges she has to deal with on a day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can understand a little bit about blindness by closing our eyes, but
Mm,
the thing is, we can always open them. She
yeah.
can't. It's quite amazing to watch what she does a lot of the time. Like, I don't have to do any washing anymore. She just does all that. She can find her way out to the clothesline by herself and hang the washing out. She folds it all up. When I first met them with her previous guide dog, Helen, her and Helen were walking about 5Ks a day. And Larissa actually used to do marathons. She's actually done the New York Marathon 3 times,
Oh, really?
99, 2000, and 2001. So
It's
again,
impressive.
a lot of things are determination, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And she'd sort of had a go at, what do they call it when you ski without snow? She'd had a go at that when she was younger. Um, and the first year we met which was the same year. Yeah, you'd remember that. The same year I was down there with you guys. I just said, well, would you like to come down and have a holiday and, come down and have a go at skiing? And her and my mum came down for a few days together and we put her on the ski field and she picked it up really well. And actually, if anyone wants to have a look, just Google Larissa Fleming skiing or Andrew Fleming skiing and you'll find quite a bit of stuff like that.
On YouTube?
On YouTube,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
There's a couple of quite neat videos, or actually even on our website, there's a bit of that stuff as well.
Okay.
Because it is quite impressive to see that,
Yeah.
I mean, you'll know yourself, Marty. You've skied in whiteout or snowboarded in whiteout conditions,
Mm.
and it's pretty bloody scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
She can't see a thing.
There's not, you can't see anything in front of you. So for her, it's
yeah.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, when you're skiing in whiteout, you have to feel what's going on underneath you, and that's how she does it all the time. She has a guide with her all the time that skis in front of her and tells her where to turn and things like that. And she did hurt herself skiing once, which that happens to us all a bit. But she's up the chairlift. She was doing half-hour laps of McDougall's, things like that.
That's so cool.
Just being told where to go. And those videos I was talking about, particularly on our website, actually are sort of her progression skiing from start to where she got up to,
Is it a freedom feeling for her is it the thrill or is it a freedom? Is it just the feeling?
I think it's the feeling.
Yeah.
My feeling is that blindness is somewhat limiting because my disability is limiting in some ways, but I can go out and do things by myself. She's a bit more reliant on other people to do things. She always has a volunteer or two with her, and I think even that social thing is a really good thing for her. I mean, hopefully we're going to Wanaka this year, but she's got a new guide dog and she's saying, well, I don't think I'll ski this year. I'll just spend the time with Lucas, her new guide dog.
Yeah.
Way around Wanaka. It's kind of a 12-month process with a guide dog, getting familiar and getting them doing everything you want to do.
Yeah.
Whereas personally, I would struggle to go to Wanaka and not go skiing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of our speaking's been in the health and safety industry, and we've put a 10-minute segment in about Larissa, how she went blind, which was from a brain tumor when she was 11. Relative to health and safety, if you go blind from a brain tumor or getting poked in the eye, there's not a lot of difference. So we give people insight in our speeches now to what might happen if you splash a chemical in your eye or something and you end up blind. But also our speeches aren't just the doom and gloom for health and safety. Some people ask us, oh, we just want the doom and gloom about accident, and I won't actually do that because I think part of it is the progression and believing what you can do. just like I believe in myself, people implementing health and safety things need to believe that that's the right thing to do and that they can cope with those changes. So I think there's a bit of a crossover there as well.
Definitely,
And,
yeah,
and the
definitely.
speeches seem to be very well received. If you look on my website, there's some pretty good testimonials and spoken all over the country now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just like living with living with the pain now, you'll always have that pain that you got to live with.
Yeah.
Like, what are you using now to to manage the pain? Like, are you doing meditations, breath work? Is it a combination of other things as well? What do you?
Yeah. I've learned a lot of things about pain. At the start, I didn't really know what this was, and it was quite terrifying. And as you go through a lot of the things that I've been through with it, my mindset around that has got a lot stronger. And particularly when I'm skiing and things like that, I can use things like that to control my pain. Like I said before, bathing in Epsom salts, or if I'm really bad, sometimes I just sit things out for a little while, or that's how I've managed it for a long term. About 6 months ago, I was actually prescribed medical cannabis. I was starting to get a lot more trouble with shocks again and things like that. And I would say that this has been the best pain relief experience in 22 years for me. And
That's
in 6
amazing.
months since I've been on these products, I have not had a night that's kept me awake in shocks all night. If sometimes they get the odd little, they can be quite painful and quite annoying, but I can stop them. Or it seems to help my mindset. If I wake up in the morning now and I start to feel sore, I can kind of kick it back a couple of steps and get back to sleep for a while and then get up. Before taking this, I was having horrible things happening. Like I had like hypersensitivity in my bladder. So my bladder would tell me I needed to go to the toilet, and that's very important when I feel that I do, because it can cause damage to your kidneys. And since I've been taking, what would happen is I'd get up and there'd be hardly anything in my bladder, but I'd had to go through the effort of a transfer to get out of bed, doing a catheter. Often wouldn't get back to sleep. My other pain would be worse after that. And for 6 months, that hasn't been happening again now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So
News.
To me, it's just a hell of a contrast between all the normal things that people have been prescribed for lots of years and something that's been kind of villainized. And there's so much stuff coming out about it for all sorts of conditions. And I would have to say it's just made such a big difference in my life. If people are struggling with pain, I would advise you go and see your local experts about that and talk to them. And it's not just pain. There seem to be so many conditions. And what they say, the cannabis clinic doctors that I deal with, they say that it has a balancing effect on your body. And that's what I would say, that when I get those shocks, my body is just so out of balance. And now I can control it. And I'm pretty disappointed in the system that it's taken 22 years of my life and the hell that I've been through with that pain, for someone to be able to give me a product that essentially grows in the ground just about anywhere, that will help. So people need to adjust their mindsets, whatever their gobies are in their head about stuff like that. And it might not be for everyone, but I've had other things like clonazepam, and I don't know what clonazepam does for my pain. It just wipes me out, and I wake up in the morning and the pain's stopped. But it's never been a good experience for me. Yet I've got another friend who's a paraplegic that takes it all the time and has done for years, and it works for him. So, there's things like that we're all different. And one of the things that bothers me is that a doctor has never seen me in serious pain like that since I was in hospital. And to be fair to doctors, I have to wonder how anyone can fully understand what I go through. And now, because this has been such a product, such a beneficial thing to me, I've applied to ACC for funding. They've declined it, and I'm now going through a review with them. So I'd be interested to see what the outcome of that is.
Mm.
But from my point of view, I cringe at the thought of someone being injured like me and having to live through what I've lived through. And I'm prepared to put myself out there and tell people what a difference this has made to my life, because the other things, as I explained before, that I was on were not good things. I don't have any bowel issues, anything like that. My bladder, everything seems to be working better over the last 6 months since I've been on this stuff. So
yeah, that's very powerful. That's wonderful to hear.
yeah, and I would like to put it out there that one of the reports I've read about the benefits of medicinal cannabis and pain, is saying that there are 2 billion people in the world that suffer from chronic pain. So I'm one of those 2 billion people. And if some of the other 2 billion people would like to have a conversation with me or an email or something about dealing with pain, I would like to be able to help people with that, because I would have to say, amongst everything else, not being able to walk, sexual function, all those sort of things, I would say that pain has been the biggest challenge for me. And I feel I've done pretty well picking myself back up after an accident like I did and achieving what I did. I've got basically $1 million worth of property, a freehold house. I've got a lot of options other people don't have. But pain has been one of the biggest challenges, and I would have been doing a lot more without having to deal with pain, because essentially I've had to manage everything I do around pain. And I stopped sort of pursuing coaching clients. One reason was that speaking took off. Another reason was I found it, as pain varied, I found it quite challenging to feel that I was going to be up to being on form to coach several clients when I had lots of appointments during the day and then something else took over. I find if I need to do a speech, like I said, I've got a very powerful mindset, and I can often put pain aside for a couple of hours so I could go and do a speech. Also, if I was in that position, a lot of adrenaline, feeling good about what I was doing, being able to help people, that would help me put pain aside. But as my mate Ian that I used to ski with, him and I have had conversations like this. He gets similar sort of pain, that you can't stop it. You can defer it, but it always catches up with it and normally comes back worse if you put it off. So you just put that in context of trying to work, or that was one of the reasons I didn't want to go down the employment route, because I've employed people, and if I employ people, I expect them to be productive. And I didn't feel comfortable that I could actually be productive in an employed role. And the types of things I've done, same thing. I can go and renovate a house when it's empty, and I can push myself through that, or I can stop when I need to. I'm not answerable to other people. So I've sort of done those kinds of routes, if you like. I was able to write a book. I could stop when I couldn't handle the pain, and then I could carry on when it was suitable. But I really don't think a lot of people, and sadly a lot of the people making the decisions on whether this stuff should be funded and things, really understand the complications of all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very, very powerful, and hopefully we're heading in that direction, can head in that direction a lot quicker. I do remember a conversation with you. You were saying you feel you've only got maybe so many years left that you can sit down ski for. Do you think by, with having the medicinal marijuana, like the cannabis, would that prolong? Do you think the longevity?
It may do. It hasn't been an easy journey. There were different things that, and my experience with dealing with pain and changing medications, it's never a good thing. And then I had to play around and get the doses right and things like that. But you've been talking to me for quite a while. I don't look wasted and out of control, do I?
No. Yeah.
It doesn't have an effect on me like that, and that's one of the things that people are concerned about, that you're going to be a stoned idiot and not be able to do anything. Well, I can do anything I want.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the flip side is, if you're in serious pain, you're actually very limited to what you can do. I can push through the burning for a lot of things. If I start getting serious shocks, I just can't do anything. And you talk about suicidal thoughts.
Oh.
You start having a night like those nights I've explained. I mean, I remember one night I was thinking I should just go out to the garage and hang myself. And one of the things with my pain is that I'm very sensitive to cold. It was the middle of winter. And I remember thinking after that, oh my God, I'd be in agony before I could do that. No, I'm not going to do that. And they're really stupid thoughts, but they're thoughts that you've got to learn to control. And what I would say, it sounds horrible, suicidal thoughts, and there's negative connotations to that. I think of it as an out. Like I've had all these things that I've had to go through, and when there's no way out, you feel trapped. And hopefully I'll never commit suicide. But sometimes thinking down that line, it's like, well, there's a way out.
Yeah.
But it's not the best way out. It would be better to look at a different way, wouldn't I, than to go down that. Does that make sense to you?
Definitely.
I don't want people thinking I'm depressed every day, but just sometimes there are things that just tip me over, and it's like, oh, I've had enough of this.
Yeah, but you just want to get to a point. I guess I feel it needs to be spoken more. Like, everyone has negative thoughts that are going on in their heads, and that's just trying to catch yourself out and being aware of it and finding strategies and tools to combat and not let it win the day, which is, can be harder than said than done. But when you feel like all the walls are closing in on you, it's trying to find the fastest thing that's going to snap you out of that state. For me, it's actually the cold showers in the winter, or doing ice baths and the breath work. Funnily enough, it's the fastest thing that can snap me out of if I do find, I feel like everything's closing in and I feel alone.
I don't really share those thoughts with people. I mean, I will in the certain situations, but it's not. What I would say is, I'm not going to go to my wife and say I feel like killing myself today.
No,
I can out in my mind, and I'll put it aside, and I'll go and do something else, and I'll get myself more positive. But I think there's dangers in, a lot of people talk about suicide, but it's not. I don't think it's really a serious thought, and then people don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Think of if I said that to someone in a moment where people thought I wasn't feeling well, they would be very concerned about it. So, just ways, we're all different in how we deal with things. But, I mean, even people kind of having half-hearted attempts at suicide. I've never attempted it. I've had some pretty dark thoughts about what I might do. And I always found that if I could wait until the morning, I was always a lot better off. And another thing that stopped me, what would that do to my mother? If and I'm not meaning so much now. I'm meaning in the really early stages where I had all those things to deal with, and I was in a really, really dark space.
Did you feel when you're in those spaces, like thinking of others or finding a way to help others in some way, sort of shifted you out of that hole, that dark space?
Yeah, it did. Another thing I often say to people is, remember to have a glimpse in the rear view mirror. Like there were things like in the early days, I would fall out of my chair most days, or, stupid things. I might wheel with one wheel into a table or something and tip out of my chair or over a towel. And that was all really hard stuff to deal with. It's hard to get back into your chair, and it hurt and all those things. But if I look in the rear view, as the years went on or time went on, if I had a bit of a glimpse in the rear view mirror when that happened, I'd think, oh, wow, that used to happen just about every day. It hasn't happened for a month now. Well, that's an improvement, isn't it? And whatever it might be, look, I don't think it's a good thing dwelling on the past. but I think it's a good thing to have a glimpse back to so you can relate to where you were and how far you've come along the journey. And I guess similarly, hey, I haven't come enough. What do I need to do to change this and get it a wee bit better?
Awesome. Awesome, Andrew. And if there was one last thing, if, there was someone listening to this, and they're going through a rough time, whatever the adversity or the challenge is, what would you say to them if it just meant, they could live another day? Like, what would be something you feel you could help?
I would say find a little bit of hope and hang on to it. Follow the hope down that path and see where it leads you. And I could say, right from the time of the accident, lying in the paddock, and how I talked about hope and what got me found, to when you're freaking out about how you're going to pay your mortgage, or at the moment I'm coming off a very low interest rate this year sometime, going on a high interest rate, and if you listen to the media, it's all doom and gloom. But if you start to dig into little things and listen to some of the experts, I don't think it's as bad as some people want you to think it is.
And do you think on that note, like turning off the news is a thing that you...
Yeah, I'm selective about what I watch on the news.
Yeah.
I don't, just government things or things like that are at the moment. I like to watch what the leaders are saying.
Yeah.
But I am very, and that's something I learned a lot of years ago. Just don't watch every bit of news, or whatever news I hear, I think very carefully about it. And again, a lot of thoughts like that I keep to myself until I know what I think is right or whatever, because right through, or even just talking to people's perception or what is put out in the news for whatever reason, who wants you to believe that?
I know a big one that I find helps for me is taking on whoever's saying wherever the information's coming from. Is it am I coming from a place of fear, or am I coming from a place of love and making that decision to taking on that information?
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful one.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean by that. Or, other things people, there were a lot of years that I wanted to have a partner for, or, there were things like that. And I remember people saying, just go out, even if it's just the supermarket. And isn't that a bit ironic when you think about where I met my wife? But, like, a supermarket's probably a good place in a way in your local area where you know people, because you usually run into someone you know. I found this in a chair that often people would stop and talk to me, and I think they see you and they think, I think some people might be having a bad day and they think, oh my God, look what's happening to that guy, and people seem to be drawn to you. And ironically, I can actually remember sitting on a street corner and watching Larissa walk past with her guide dog before I'd even met her. And I was just looking across the street and I thought, I wonder what that set of challenges is like. So there's just so many little things, like get yourself out there and learn things. And now that Larissa and I are together, a lot of places we go, other people are drawn to both of us, and we have some really interesting conversations that I think people come away better off for. And I think we often do too, because it puts our things in perspective. We're being able to help someone. Very valuable things. But it's, for me, it was really easy to stay at home because it was a bit of a hassle going out. But I found the more I went out, or even just going to seminars. So this National Speakers Association, I used to go to Auckland once a month, which was a 5-hour drive, go to a meeting for 2 hours, drive back to Hamilton, which was another hour and a half, stay with my mate and drive home the next day. But what did I learn out of that? Because I put myself out of my comfort zone. One night I even slept in my car because I couldn't afford a hotel to stay in, and things like that. But just put yourself out there and just meet different people. for me, just getting out of a little town like Hawera and being exposed to people in Auckland, or, I can remember being at seminars in Australia and someone comes up and talks to me, oh, where are you from? And I tell them, and they're like, oh my God, I just couldn't be bothered getting out of bed, and I just live down the road, and you've come from there and you've done this. And but it's about, what do you want to learn, and how important is that to you, and what are you prepared to do that? And I'm sure a lot of people thought I was nuts, the things that I was doing. And I'm not rich, but I don't have to worry about my rent going up. It's no one's going to tell us to move out of this house. We're in a lovely little town on the coast. It's a 2-kilometre walk down to the beach, and I've got a powered wheel for my chair. I can just hop on it and be down there in 10 minutes.
Yeah, amazing.
And there's things now that I'm getting on top of my pain again. I am starting to think outside the box a bit more, and what I might be able to do, or what Larissa and I might be able to do together. But in lots of ways, I feel like I'm retired. I'm 54. I feel more like I'm 64 after 22 years in a wheelchair, and I don't want to be committed to doing things every day. I need to give myself that time and make life a bit easier. But I would really, I don't know, it's nice being paid to speak. There are reasons that I will speak for nothing for the right cause, to be able to share a story and help people. And interesting enough, when I first started speaking, the chemist that I was going to at the time, that I'd known since I was a kid, he started seeing me achieving. He was asking me what I'd been doing every time I went in there, and then he asked me to speak to his Rotary Club. And that was really confronting. I hated speaking at school. Got 30% for school C English. So it was quite a terrifying thing. Didn't really know how to use a computer. Figured out how to put a few photos on PowerPoint. And it was really well received. And then, other things like the Roger Hamilton stuff and all those other things I talked about, they just led to different avenues. And then I met people that were getting paid a lot of money to speak and things like that. And, I can't even say I've made a lot of money out of speaking, but it's been a very good thing for me. It's paid for all the money that I've put into things that have helped me, all that sort of stuff. And it gives me different options, and it gives me the chance to get out and help people.
Yeah. And have purpose and be fulfilling.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Leading up to, you get paid well for speaking, but leading up to it, like I say, $100,000 or more, you know what I mean? That's all stuff, whether it be property or whatever, it's all stuff that helped you get to that point. But it's just made such a difference to my life,
Yeah. Powerful. And one last thing, what does unlocked from within mean to you?
Unlocked from within. Yeah, I've thought a lot about that, Marty. And I would say that there were lots of things that had me locked up. Just little, like I said before, a lot of the things that stop you are actually just in your head. And if you can see a different perception, or, find a bit of hope, or just step over that little bit of fear, you will unlock all sorts of things from within yourself.
Amazing.
I just see so many people around, and to me, they are very limited by their mindsets. And that doesn't mean you need to be a millionaire. But even just owning a house is a huge thing when you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay that off or what income's coming in. People say it's a lot of money to go to Wanaka for a year, but most people are spending more than that on rent now.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that.
Yeah. Powerful. Well, Andrew, again, thanks for your time. It's been amazing. It's been an honor, and it's been super valuable. I believe this will help a lot of people that are either watching or listening. Where can we find you?
AndrewFleming.nz is my website.
Great. Awesome, Andrew. Well, thanks again.
My email, if anyone wants it, is andrew@andrewfleming.nz. And I'm on Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Awesome.
People will find me on there if you want.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
If you do message me, just let me know that it's from the podcast so I have an idea who you are.
Awesome. Again, Andrew, thanks again for your time. It's been truly amazing. And like I said, it's been an inspiring story. And I highly suggest anyone to reach out to Andrew if you'd like to buy his book, Change the Channel. It's been a book that I like to go back to when I'm dealing with a curveball in life. It definitely puts everything back into perspective. So I highly recommend people checking it out. I
find reading my own book sometimes. Even now and then I pick it up and read something, and I kind of find that very similar.
Definitely.
But I would like to say, Marty, that it's very inspiring to see where you've come from and where you've got to.
Thank you, Andrew.
As a past client and someone that I saw with potential, and it's nice to know that I was right.
Yeah, no, yeah. Like I said, thank you, and it's great to be able to call you a friend.
Yeah, and I really look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, we can get up to Cadrona sometime in the future and do it all again.
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool, matey.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay,
thanks again. Hi, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on Unlocked from Within. Please like and subscribe to get the latest episode. Please share the episode with someone you think it may help. If you'd like to learn more about Andrew Fleming or to get his book, please contact and check out Andrew on his website at andrewfleming.nz. You can also find him on LinkedIn at Andrew Fleming, Facebook Andrew Fleming, and YouTube Andrew Fleming. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Unlocked from Within.